He walked up thinking he was in control, but when the pregnant woman he shoved turned out to be the deputy chief's wife, his badge, and his career were instantly on the line. The late afternoon sun was still warm over the asphalt when Officer Travis Kelton pulled his cruiser into the parking lot of the Piggly Wiggly in Valdosta, Georgia. He'd been dispatched for what dispatch called a minor dispute, nothing unusual for a Thursday. He figured it'd be a quick talk, maybe a warning, and then back to patrol. But when he stepped out, his eyes landed on a woman standing beside a silver SUV, one hand braced against the door, the other holding a paper grocery bag. She was clearly pregnant, her belly stretching the fabric of a pale blue dress. That was Janelle Morris, though Kelton didn't know her name yet. She was talking to another woman a few feet away, and both of them looked tense. Kelton walked up with that clipped, sharp stride that told people he was in no mood for small talk. "What's going on here?" he said, not really as a question, but as a challenge. Janelle turned toward him, keeping her voice even. "Sir, I'm just loading my groceries. That car," she pointed toward a dented sedan 2 spaces over, "pulled too close and I asked if they could back up so I could get out. That's all." The other woman, a white lady in her 50s, piped up. "She started making a scene. I was just parking." Kelton's jaw shifted. "Ma'am, I'm not here to take sides. I need you to calm down," he said, looking squarely at Janelle. Her eyebrows rose. "I am calm," she replied. "You're talking to me like I've done something wrong. I just want to get home." That's when his tone hardened. "I'm giving you a lawful order. Leave the premises now." Janelle blinked in disbelief. "You're ordering me to leave a grocery store parking lot after I've paid for my food. Why?" Kelton stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Because you're causing trouble," he shot back. A man leaning on a shopping cart a few yards away had started pulling out his phone. He pressed record, the small red light blinking. "Man, this ain't right," he murmured under his breath. Janelle's voice stayed steady, but there was an edge now. "Officer, I'm 8 months pregnant. I've done nothing illegal. I'm not leaving until you explain why I'm being treated this way." Kelton's nostrils flared. "Ma'am, I'm not going to repeat myself." The witness's camera caught every second. The way Kelton's hand shot out, palm against Janelle's shoulder, pushing her back hard enough that her body jolted against the SUV door. Her bag of groceries tilted, an apple rolling across the pavement. A small gasp came from the woman in the sedan, but she said nothing. Janelle steadied herself against the car, one hand instinctively going to her belly. Her eyes widened, not just from the physical shove, but from the audacity of it. "You just put your hands on me," she said, her voice low and shaking. Kelton looked around, suddenly aware of eyes on him. "You were refusing to comply," he said, louder now, as if volume might make it true. The man with the phone took a step closer. "Sir, I'm recording this," he said. Kelton's eyes flicked to the camera. "That's fine. Make sure you get the whole thing," he said, squaring his shoulders. But something in his voice betrayed a flicker of doubt. Janelle's breathing was uneven. She bent to pick up the apple, then thought better of it. Her gaze locked on the officer. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" Kelton smirked. "Doesn't matter who you are. You follow orders like everyone else." But the look she gave him made him pause. "You'll regret that," she said quietly, sliding into the SUV's driver's seat. The witness kept his phone up, panning from Kelton to Janelle as she closed her door and started the engine. He could feel the tension in the air, a mix of disbelief and anger from those who had just watched a pregnant woman be shoved without cause. Kelton stayed planted, his patrol car idling behind him. His radio crackled, but he didn't move to answer it. For the first time that day, he felt the slightest twinge of uncertainty, but the real storm was still a few minutes away. The man holding the phone was named Curtis Hanley, a 42-year-old mechanic from across town. He hadn't planned on being part of anything newsworthy that day. He was just there to grab a 6-pack of soda and some snacks before heading home. But what he'd just seen rattled him enough that his hands were shaking as he kept recording. "Ma'am, you all right?" Curtis called out through the SUV window as Janelle put the vehicle in reverse. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice was tight. "But thank you." Curtis angled the phone down for a second, looking at the screen. The clip was nearly 2 minutes long already, Plenty to show what happened from the moment Kelton raised his voice to the shove. He knew enough about how things worked to realize that without this footage, people might never believe her side. Kelton turned to him. "Sir, I need you to put that phone away." Curtis didn't budge. "I think I'll hold on to it, for my records. That's evidence in an investigation. I can take it," Kelton said, stepping toward him. Curtis backed up, his free hand raised. "You're not taking anything from me. I saw what you did. The whole parking lot saw." The tension between the two men was thick enough to draw stares from shoppers still coming and going. A mother tugged her child toward their car. A man loading bottled water into his truck slowed just to listen. "Sir, I'm asking you to cooperate," Kelton insisted, his voice more controlled now, though the edge was still there. Curtis tilted his head, his voice steady. "And I'm telling you, you put hands on a pregnant woman for no reason. That's not going away just because you tell me to stop filming." For a few beats, neither moved. Then Kelton exhaled sharply, turned on his heel, and walked back toward his cruiser. Curtis waited until the officer was far enough away before pressing the stop button on his phone. He stood there, breathing slow, his thoughts racing. "Man, this is gonna blow up," he muttered to himself. As Janelle pulled out of the lot, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Curtis caught her eyes for just a second, a silent exchange of understanding. She gave him the faintest nod of thanks, then drove off. Curtis pocketed his phone and headed to his car, but he couldn't shake the weight in his chest. He'd seen rough arrests before, he'd seen arguments get loud. But this was something different, something that didn't sit right. Back in his car, he rewatched the footage twice. Every detail was there. The shove, Janelle's stagger, the apple rolling on the pavement, Kelton's dismissive stance afterward. He thought about sending it to a friend who worked at the local news station. But first he wanted Janelle's permission. He called out to a man loading bags a few spots over. "Hey, you know that lady? The pregnant one?" The man shook his head. "Never seen her before." Curtis hesitated. He didn't want to put the video online without context, but he also knew time mattered. These things had a way of disappearing if you waited too long. He pulled out of the lot, heading toward the gas station down the road. He needed a minute to think, and a full signal to send the clip to someone who could make it count. At the station, he parked in the shade and scrolled through his contacts. His cousin, Cheryl, was a paralegal. If anyone could advise him on the right way to handle this, it was her. "Cheryl, I got something you need to see," he said when she picked up. "What is it?" she asked. "A video. From the Piggly Wiggly parking lot. Cop shoved a pregnant woman. No reason at all. And the way he talked to her. It's bad." There was a pause on the line. "Send it now!" Curtis hit send, then sat there watching the little sending bar crawl across the screen. Less than a minute later, she called back. "Kurt, you have any idea who that is?" she asked, her voice suddenly sharper. "No, should I?" "That's Janelle Morris. Her husband's the deputy police chief." Curtis blinked. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. If this gets out, it's going to be everywhere." Curtis leaned back in his seat, staring at the steering wheel. Then maybe it should get out. But Curtis had no idea just how fast that decision would change the lives of everyone involved. By the time Janelle pulled into the driveway of her brick home on Magnolia Street, her hands were trembling. The drive from the grocery store had been short, but it was enough time for her mind to replay the shove over and over, the suddenness of it, the way it jarred her balance, the shock on the faces of strangers. She killed the engine and sat for a moment, breathing slowly. Inside, the house smelled faintly of roasted chicken. Raymond had started dinner before leaving for his late shift. She set the groceries on the counter, her hands moving automatically, but her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from an unfamiliar number popped up. "Hey, this is Curtis, the guy from the parking lot. I've got the video. We need to talk." Janelle stared at the message, her stomach tightening. She hadn't even thought about anyone filming. Her first instinct was to delete it and focus on calming herself. But curiosity, and a sense of something bigger, made her type back. "Call me." The phone rang less than a minute later. "Janelle?" Curtis's voice was low. cautious. Yes, you were the man with the phone? Yeah, I got the whole thing. From the moment he started raising his voice to when he shoved you. She closed her eyes. I can't believe that happened. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I know, Curtis said. That's why I recorded. But listen, my cousin recognized you. Said you're married to Deputy Chief Raymond Morris. Yes, she said quietly. That's my husband. Curtis let out a low whistle. Well then, this is about to get real messy, real fast. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Janelle said, Send me the video, please. Within seconds, the clip appeared on her phone. Watching it was worse than she expected. Seeing herself flinch, the way the officer's hand landed, how her body rocked back against the SUV door. Her throat tightened. Do you want me to post it? Curtis asked. Or would you rather I don't? Janelle thought of Raymond, still at work, completely unaware. She thought of the politics inside the department, the thin blue line that often meant officers protected their own, no matter what. Post it, she said finally. Don't put my name in it yet. Let people see what happened first. Curtis hesitated. All right. But once it's up, it's out of my hands. After the call ended, Janelle set her phone down and went to the living room, lowering herself onto the couch. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the faint kicks beneath her palm. We're okay, she whispered to her unborn daughter. We're okay. But deep down, she knew things were about to explode. Later that evening, Raymond came home just before 9. He hung his jacket on the hook, kissed her on the forehead, and asked about her day. She told him in pieces, starting with the parking lot argument, then the officer's arrival, then the shove. Raymond's expression didn't change much until she played the video. He watched it twice without speaking. His name is Travis Kelton, Raymond said finally, his voice low but steady. Been on the force 7 years. I've had to talk to him about his attitude before, but this... He exhaled through his nose. This is different. What are you going to do? Janelle asked. I'm going to make some calls, he said, pulling his phone from his pocket. And I'm going to make sure you're never treated like that again. She reached for his hand. Raymond, it's not just me. You know that, right? If he can do this to me in broad daylight, pregnant, in front of witnesses, what do you think he's doing when no one's filming? Raymond's jaw shifted slightly. I know. And that's exactly why this won't get swept under the rug. As he stepped into the hallway to call the chief of police, Janelle sat back on the couch. She could hear his voice in the other room, low, controlled, but urgent. Her phone buzzed again. Curtis had sent her a link. The video was already live on Facebook. It had been posted less than 30 minutes and already had hundreds of shares. Comments were pouring in. This is disgusting. I know her. She's the sweetest person you'll meet. He needs to be fired. Janelle's chest tightened. It was happening faster than she imagined, but the real shock would come when the video reached people outside of Valdosta, people who had no loyalty to protect Officer Kelton. By midnight, the clip had leapt from Curtis's Facebook page to local community groups, then to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The shaky cell phone footage, just under 2 minutes long, was enough to make anyone stop scrolling. You could hear Kelton's voice, sharp, commanding, and dismissive, followed by the shove. You could see Janelle's startled reaction, her hand going to her belly, and the stunned silence from bystanders. The comments section was a mix of outrage, disbelief, and calls for immediate action. Strangers tagged news stations and civil rights groups. A popular Atlanta-based activist page reposted the clip with the caption, "Pregnant woman shoved by Valdosta police officer. Where's the accountability?" That post alone racked up over 50,000 views in the first hour. Curtis sat in his living room, his phone buzzing non-stop. Messages from friends, family, and complete strangers poured in. Some wanted to know more details, some thanked him for filming, others warned him to be careful because he had just crossed the line with the police department. Meanwhile, across town, Janelle lay in bed unable to sleep. Raymond had gone into his home office to handle calls, and the murmur of his voice carried faintly down the hallway. Her phone lit up every few seconds with notifications. She opened Instagram and was stunned to see her own face, frozen mid-expression in the video thumbnail, on an account she'd never followed. She tapped on the post. Thousands of comments scrolled past. Most were supportive, some furious, a few dismissive, accusing her of making it about race or not complying. She closed the app and set the phone face down. In the police department's main office, the night shift sergeant, Dennis Rowe, was drinking his third cup of coffee when his desk phone rang. The voice on the other end was short and clipped. "Have you seen the video?" Rowe hadn't. 10 seconds later, a link hit his inbox. He pressed play, watching silently. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. He'd worked alongside Kelton for years, knew his temper, but had never imagined something this blatant would make it online. Rowe sent the link up the chain to the chief, who was already in a late-night call with Raymond. At 12:43 a.m., the department's official Facebook page posted a statement. "We are aware of a video circulating on social media involving an interaction between one of our officers and a member of the public. The matter is under review. Further comment will be provided when available." The post was flooded with comments within minutes, most calling for Kelton's suspension, others mocking the department for its vague language. Raymond returned to the bedroom around 1 in the morning. He sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders heavy. "The chief has seen it. Internal Affairs is opening an investigation first thing in the morning." Janelle looked at him. "What does that mean for Kelton?" "For now? Administrative leave. But with the way this is spreading, it could be more." She searched his face for any sign of hesitation, but there was none. "Raymond, you know people are going to say you're just doing this because I'm your wife." He nodded slowly. "They can say what they want. If it wasn't you, if it was anyone else in that video, I'd want the same thing done." Across the city, Kelton himself had already seen the video. A fellow officer had sent it to him with the message, "It's everywhere, man." Sitting at his kitchen table, Kelton replayed it 3 times. He cursed under his breath, tossed his phone aside, then picked it up again. Each time he watched, the shove looked worse than it had in his memory. His own voice sounded harsher than he remembered. His girlfriend, Tanya, leaned against the doorway. "That's bad, Trav. Real bad." "They don't know the whole story," he muttered. "Doesn't matter," she said. "That video's all anyone's going to care about now." He stared at the screen one last time before locking the phone. "I'll handle it," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But handling it wouldn't be up to him anymore. The public had already taken control of the narrative. By 7 a.m., the Valdosta Police Department was a hornet's nest. Phones rang non-stop. Reporters were already camped outside, and the chief's inbox was stacked with requests for comment from local and national outlets. Officers arriving for the morning shift walked through the front doors with their heads down, avoiding eye contact with the cameras pointed at the building. Inside, Chief Harold Bowers sat at the long conference table with Raymond Morris and 2 members of Internal Affairs. The video played on a large screen in front of them. No sound this time, just the image of Kelton stepping into Janelle's space, his hand making contact, her body jolting against the SUV. Even without audio, the aggression was unmistakable. When the clip ended, the room was quiet except for the faint hum of the projector. "I don't see how we defend this," Bowers said finally, leaning back in his chair. 7 years on the job or not, that shove's gonna read the same to every person who watches it. Raymond's voice was calm but direct. "You're right. And if we pretend it's something it's not, this department's credibility is done." One of the Internal Affairs officers, a woman named Kelly Ruiz, spoke next. "We've pulled his personnel file. He's had 3 prior complaints for excessive force, none of them sustained, but 2 involved aggressive behavior toward women." Bowers exhaled through his nose. "This isn't a pattern we can ignore anymore." Raymond's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen, a text from Janelle. News vans outside the house. He clenched his jaw, slipped the phone face down on the table, and kept listening. Bowers turned to him. "Raymond, I'm going to be blunt. I can't have you involved in the official investigation. It's a conflict of interest." "I understand," Raymond said. "But off the record, I'll tell you. If we don't act quickly, this will spread beyond us. The longer we drag our feet, the worse it looks." At 9:30 a.m., Kelton was called into the station. He walked past the cameras without speaking, his hands in his pockets, his face pale. In the chief's office, he stood across the desk as Bowers informed him he'd be placed on paid administrative leave pending the investigation. Kelton kept his voice flat. Paid leave? That's it? For now, Bowers said. But the evidence isn't in your favor. And with the public pressure, things could change fast. Raymond stood against the wall, silent. Kelton's eyes flicked toward him. This about your wife? He asked. Raymond's tone didn't rise. This is about your actions. You put your hands on a pregnant woman in a grocery store parking lot, Travis. My wife or not, that's inexcusable. Kelton's mouth twitched, as if he wanted to fire back, but he said nothing. He signed the paperwork, left his badge and gun on the desk, and walked out. In the hallway, officers avoided meeting his eyes. A few glanced at him, then quickly looked away. He'd been one of them for years, but in this moment, he was radioactive. By noon, the department issued a second public statement. Officer Travis Kelton has been placed on administrative leave pending an internal affairs investigation into an incident involving a member of the public. We take all allegations of misconduct seriously and will release further details as the investigation proceeds. The statement didn't name Janelle, but the comments online filled in the blanks instantly. Screenshots of the announcement were shared alongside her photo from the video, tagging national media outlets. Back at home, Janelle watched it all unfold from the living room couch. Her phone buzzed with calls from relatives, neighbors, and even a woman she hadn't spoken to since high school. The message was always the same. We saw the video. We're with you. Raymond returned home briefly around lunchtime, looking worn. They've got him off the street, he said. But the protests are already being planned. This is bigger than just the department now. Janelle nodded slowly. Good. Maybe it's about time. But as the community's anger grew, so did the risk that the situation could spiral beyond anyone's control. By the next morning, the parking lot of the Valdosta Police Department looked more like a rally site than a government building. Dozens of residents had gathered, holding hand-painted signs, Justice for Janelle, Protect Mothers, Not Abusers, Fire Kelton Now. The crowd grew steadily as the day went on. Retirees in folding chairs, college students with megaphones, parents with young children on their hips. The sound of chanting carried down Patterson Street. No justice, no peace, echoed off the brick storefronts, mixing with the occasional blare of a car horn from passing drivers showing support. Janelle sat in the passenger seat of her friend Camille's car, parked across the street from the demonstration. She hadn't planned to attend. Raymond had warned her it could get chaotic. But she wanted to see it for herself. They're out here for you, Camille said, nodding toward the signs. Janelle's throat tightened. I didn't ask for any of this, she murmured. Doesn't matter. It's not just about you anymore. Across the street, Curtis stood near the front of the crowd, holding his phone high to live stream. People recognized him from the video. Some shook his hand, others hugged him. He kept repeating, I just did what anybody should have done. The protest wasn't without tension. A few counter-protesters showed up, waving thin blue line flags and shouting that Kelton was being railroaded. One man with a bullhorn yelled, She should have complied, but was quickly drowned out by the chants from the larger group. Inside the station, the blinds on the front windows were drawn. Officers moved through the halls with tight expressions. They could hear the crowd outside and knew every word, every chant was aimed at them as much as at Kelton. Raymond stood in the lobby with two other officers, his arms folded. We can't ignore this, he said to the sergeant on duty. The sergeant shrugged. We're not ignoring it. We're just not engaging. Raymond glanced toward the glass doors. If we don't address it head-on, it's going to keep growing. Meanwhile, at Kelton's small house on the west side of town, the blinds were closed tight. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the muted TV showing live coverage of the protests. His phone buzzed with messages, some from friends offering support, others from people he hadn't spoken to in years telling him to do the right thing and resign. Tanya set a cup of coffee in front of him. You see this? It's not dying down, she said. I see it, he muttered. They don't know the whole story. They don't care about the story. They care about what they saw on that video. Kelton rubbed his temples. It was one push. She's fine. This is getting blown way out of... Tanya cut him off. Trav, she's pregnant. You shoved a pregnant woman on camera. How do you think that's going to play?" He didn't answer. Back at the protest, a local pastor stepped up to the makeshift podium, a wooden crate with a microphone clipped to it. His voice boomed over the crowd. "We are here because we demand accountability. If the department will not protect our mothers and daughters, then we will make sure the world knows what is happening in Valdosta." The crowd roared in approval. Janelle felt a swell of emotion. She didn't like the spotlight, didn't want her name to be used as a rallying cry, but she also couldn't deny the power of what she was seeing. People coming together for something bigger than themselves. Camille glanced at her. "You thinking about speaking?" Janelle shook her head. "Not yet, but maybe soon." As the sun dipped lower, the crowd began to thin, but the energy didn't fade. People were already planning the next day's demonstration, sharing updates on social media, tagging national civil rights organizations. Curtis ended his live stream and checked his notifications. A message from a major news network sat at the top. "We'd like to interview you about the incident. Please call us." He looked up at the now empty crate where the pastor had spoken. "This is just the start," he said quietly to himself. But the bigger the movement grew, the more the pressure mounted on the department to deliver answers. Fast. By Monday morning, Internal Affairs had turned a corner office into their temporary war room. Files, interview transcripts, and printouts of social media posts were spread across the long table. 2 investigators, Kelly Ruiz and her partner Tom Beasley, were in the thick of it. Kelly clicked the remote, replaying the bodycam footage from Kelton's uniform. The video started mid-conversation, his voice sharp, ordering Janelle to leave. The shove happened exactly as in Curtis's clip. No bodycam angle could soften the impact or the optics. Tom leaned back in his chair. No justification on tape. She wasn't threatening, wasn't resisting. He went straight to physical contact. Kelly nodded. "And the fact that the bystander's video matches perfectly, it's airtight." The next step was interviewing everyone involved. Janelle came in first, escorted by Raymond, but seated alone with the investigators. Kelly kept her tone gentle. "Mrs. Morris, can you walk us through what happened, starting from when you arrived at the parking lot?" Janelle recounted the events in detail. The tight parking space, the brief exchange with the other woman, Kelton's arrival and rapid escalation. "I asked him why I was being told to leave, and he wouldn't give me a reason," she said. "Then he shoved me. I'm 8 months pregnant. If I'd fallen, I could have lost my baby." Tom scribbled notes. "Were you aware anyone was filming?" "I saw a man with a phone after it happened, but I didn't realize he'd captured the whole thing." After she left, they brought in Curtis. He was direct, almost blunt. "If I hadn't filmed it, you know how this would have gone," he said. "She'd have a complaint on file, and his word would outweigh hers. I've seen it too many times." Kelly didn't dispute it. "Did Officer Kelton say anything to you after the incident?" Curtis recounted the exchange, Kelton telling him to stop filming, threatening to take the phone. "Did you feel pressured or intimidated?" Kelly asked. "Yeah, but I wasn't about to back down." Kelton's interview came last. He entered the room in plain clothes, his badge and weapon already turned in. His posture was rigid, jaw set. Kelly started simply. "Why did you order Mrs. Morris to leave the parking lot?" "She was causing a scene," Kelton said. "Loud, confrontational. People were staring." Tom leaned forward. "We've reviewed the footage. She wasn't shouting or threatening anyone." Kelton's eyes flicked between them. "Look, sometimes you've got to control the situation before it gets worse." "Control it how?" Kelly asked. "By making sure people comply." "She didn't." Kelly paused. "So you pushed her?" "I guided her back," he said quickly. Tom clicked a button, and the shove played on the monitor. The sound of Janelle's body hitting the SUV door filled the room. Kelton's shoulders stiffened. "That's not a guide, officer," Kelly said evenly. Kelton didn't answer. Outside the investigation room, Raymond waited in the hallway. He could hear muffled voices, but not the words. His phone vibrated again. Another text from Janelle. "They're calling from Good Morning America." By the end of the day, Kelly and Tom had compiled their preliminary findings. Excessive force, conduct unbecoming, and failure to de-escalate. They also included the prior complaints in the file. In the chief's office, Kelly laid the folder on his desk. The evidence is overwhelming. We recommend termination. Bowers rubbed his temples. Public opinion's already decided. But if we move too fast, Kelton's union will fight it. I need this airtight. Raymond spoke for the first time since walking in. It is airtight. Bowers looked at him. You know we can't make this about you. It's not about me, Raymond said. It's about an officer who put his hands on a pregnant woman without cause. If that's not enough for termination, what is? Bowers didn't answer immediately. He just closed the folder, as if the weight of it alone made the decision inevitable. But even with the investigation leaning toward his dismissal, the final call would play out under the glare of the entire nation's attention. Kelton had never been the type to sit still, but in the days following his suspension, his small living room began to feel like a cage. He spent most of his time pacing between the couch and the kitchen, occasionally glancing out the blinds at the street. Tanya kept telling him to just lay low, but the constant stream of notifications on his phone made that impossible. The news channels had his face plastered alongside headlines about Valdosta officer shoves pregnant woman. Clips of the incident played on loop, often slowed down, the shove frozen mid-frame like an incriminating photograph. Late one night, he sat alone at the table with a glass of whiskey, scrolling through the comments section on one of the bigger news sites. Every insult cut deeper than he expected. Coward. Thug with a badge. Should never wear a uniform again. He told himself they didn't know the whole story, but that excuse felt weaker each time he thought it. Tanya walked in, her robe tied loosely. You're still up? Couldn't sleep, he muttered. She leaned against the counter. Trav, you've got to stop reading that stuff. It's not going to help. He didn't look at her. You think I'm the bad guy too? She hesitated. I think you made a bad choice, and now the whole world's watching it over and over. Kelton stared at the glass in his hand. I've been on the job 7 years. I've been in worse situations. But this... He cut himself off. But this was different, Tanya finished. Because it was pointless. You could have walked away. He didn't respond, but her words sat heavy in his chest. The next morning he drove to his parents' place on the edge of town. They hadn't called since the video broke, and he wasn't sure what to expect. His mother, a retired schoolteacher, answered the door and hugged him, but there was a stiffness to it. Your father's in the den, she said quietly. Kelton found him sitting in his recliner, the TV muted on a news channel showing footage from the protests. You've put us in a tough spot, son, his father said, eyes fixed on the screen. Kelton tried to explain how he thought Janelle was escalating, how he'd wanted to maintain control, but his father cut him off. You pushed a pregnant woman, Travis. You're not going to talk your way out of what people saw with their own eyes. The words landed like a punch. His father had never spoken to him that way. That afternoon he took a drive to clear his head, but ended up parked outside the grocery store where it all happened. He watched people come and go, normal life carrying on like nothing had changed. But for him, everything had. His mind replayed the moment, Janelle's eyes locking with his after the shove, the way she'd said, "You'll regret that." Back then he'd dismissed it as empty words. Now it felt like a prophecy. Meanwhile, across town, Raymond sat in his office, fielding another call from a reporter asking if he'd be willing to speak publicly. He'd declined every request so far, but the pressure was building. In private moments, he thought about Kelton, not with sympathy, but with a strange awareness that the man's life was unraveling in real time. At home, Janelle was feeling the strain too. Support from strangers was overwhelming, but so was the scrutiny. She found herself avoiding trips to the store, worried about being recognized or drawn into conversations she didn't want to have. Kelton's name was now trending on multiple platforms. Memes had begun circulating, some mocking him, others using the incident as a symbol of police misconduct. His face had become shorthand for everything the protesters outside the department were angry about. One night, lying in bed, Kelton scrolled through his contacts and hovered over Raymond's name. For a brief moment, he considered calling, to explain, to apologize, maybe just to say something human. But he couldn't bring himself to press the button. Instead, he locked the phone, stared at the ceiling, and let the weight of silence settle in. But silence wouldn't protect him for long. The department was preparing to announce its decision, and once they did, there would be no turning back. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Thursday. By 9:15, the parking lot outside the Valdosta Police Department was packed with reporters, camera crews, and locals eager to hear the verdict. The air buzzed with conversations, microphones being tested, and the occasional chant from protesters still holding their signs. Inside, the mood was tense. Chief Bowers stood behind a lectern in the briefing room, a folder in front of him. Raymond was in the back, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. Kelton sat in a small office down the hall, flanked by a union representative. He hadn't decided if he'd stay for the announcement or slip out quietly when it was over. At exactly 10 o'clock, Bowers stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning. After a thorough internal affairs investigation into the incident involving Officer Travis Kelton and Mrs. Janelle Morris, we have reached a conclusion. The investigation found that Officer Kelton violated department policy regarding the use of force, de-escalation procedures, and conduct unbecoming of an officer. Effective immediately, Officer Kelton's employment with the Valdosta Police Department is terminated." Gasps rippled through the room. Outside, the announcement hit the crowd like a spark to dry grass. Cheers erupted, signs waved higher, people hugged each other. The reporters began shouting questions. "Will there be criminal charges? Has the officer apologized to Mrs. Morris? What changes will be made to department policy?" Bowers answered what he could, sidestepped what he couldn't, and ended with, "We are committed to accountability and transparency. This incident does not reflect the values of our department." Raymond slipped out before the briefing ended. He walked down the hall to the small office where Kelton sat staring at the floor. "It's official," Raymond said. Kelton didn't look up. "Yeah, I heard." There was a long pause before Raymond added, "You could have avoided all of this with a conversation instead of a shove." Kelton finally raised his eyes. "You think I don't know that now? You knowing it now doesn't undo what you did," Raymond said. His tone was flat, but there was an undercurrent of something heavier. Not anger, but disappointment. "If you've got anything to say to Janelle, say it. After today, there won't be another chance." Kelton hesitated, then nodded. "I'll talk to her." Later that afternoon, Janelle agreed to meet at the department's side entrance, away from the cameras. She arrived with Camille, who stayed in the car. Kelton was already there, leaning against the wall, looking smaller than she remembered. "Mrs. Morris," he began, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because of all this," he gestured vaguely, meaning the media, the protests, the firing. "But because I was wrong. I handled it badly. You didn't deserve that." Janelle looked at him for a long moment. "You could have hurt me. You could have hurt my baby. And you didn't even stop to think about that in the moment." "I know," Kelton said. "If I could go back, I would." She shook her head. "You don't get to go back, but you can decide who you're going to be moving forward. I hope you make a better choice next time." Kelton nodded once, then turned and walked away without another word. That evening, the local news played the highlights of the press conference, intercut with footage of the protests and interviews with residents. In her living room, Janelle sat beside Raymond, their hands clasped. "You did it," he said softly. "We all did," she replied. "Curtis, the people who showed up, everyone who spoke out, it took all of them." Outside, the protests had quieted, but the conversations continued online. People were still sharing the video, now accompanied by headlines about the firing. The incident had become more than a local story. It was part of a larger national dialogue about accountability. But for Janelle, the real victory wasn't the headlines. It was knowing that her voice, and the voices of those who stood with her, had made change happen in plain sight. In the weeks following Kelton's firing, Valdosta slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but something in the air felt different. People who had never spoken to each other before were greeting one another in the grocery store aisles, at gas pumps, in church parking lots, almost as if the community had collectively realized they shared more than they'd thought. For Janelle, life didn't snap back to normal. There were still whispers when she went out, strangers who recognized her from the video. Some approached to thank her, to say her courage had made them feel seen. Others kept their distance, unsure whether speaking up would be welcome. She took it all in stride, focusing on her pregnancy and the baby she'd soon be holding. One Saturday afternoon, she met Curtis at a small cafe downtown. He brought his daughter, a bright-eyed 11-year-old who looked at Janelle with a mix of awe and curiosity. "My dad says you're the reason people are listening now," the girl said. Janelle smiled. "Your dad's the reason people saw what happened. Without him, none of this would have gone anywhere." Curtis shrugged, sipping his coffee. "I just hit record. You're the one who stood your ground." They talked for over an hour, about the protests, about how quickly the story had spread, about the messages both of them were still getting. Before they left, Curtis leaned in slightly. "You know, some folks asked me if I'd do it again, even if it meant trouble. I told them yeah. Every time." Elsewhere in town, Kelton was keeping a low profile. He'd moved in with his older brother temporarily, avoiding the grocery stores and diners he used to frequent. Every now and then, he'd catch a glimpse of his own face on a TV screen or phone in a public place. He didn't linger on it, but he also couldn't ignore it. The weight of what he'd done stayed with him, replaying at random moments. One evening, he wrote a letter, not to the department, not to the media, but to himself. In it, he detailed the choices he'd made, the shortcuts he'd taken in his approach to policing, the times he'd let frustration dictate his actions. He didn't know if he'd ever show it to anyone, but writing it forced him to face truths he'd been dodging for years. Meanwhile, the department began implementing mandatory de-escalation training and revisiting its complaint review process. It wasn't a complete overhaul, but it was a start. Raymond quietly pushed for these changes behind the scenes, careful not to make it about his family, but about preventing the next incident. At home, Janelle stood in the nursery one evening, folding tiny onesies and placing them in a dresser. Raymond leaned in the doorway, watching her. "You ready?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "As ready as I can be." He stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you. You didn't just protect yourself. You helped protect others who might have been next." Janelle's gaze dropped to the folded clothes. It shouldn't take something like this to make people pay attention, but maybe it's worth it if it stops it from happening again. A few days later, a local church invited her to speak at a community forum on police accountability. She hesitated, but ultimately agreed. Standing at the podium, she looked out at the crowd, neighbors, students, retirees, officers in plain clothes, and said, "I'm not here because I want attention. I'm here because what happened to me could happen to anyone. The only reason I'm standing here today is because someone chose to speak up, and a community chose to stand with me. We can't afford to be silent when we see wrong. Change doesn't start in a courtroom or at a press conference. It starts the moment someone says, 'This isn't right,' and then acts on it." The applause that followed wasn't loud or raucous. It was steady, deliberate, the kind that lingers because it means something. As the meeting ended, Janelle felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest. What had begun in a grocery store parking lot with a shove had become a reminder, to her, to her town, to anyone paying attention, that respect, empathy, and accountability aren't just ideals, they're choices made in moments that matter. If you believe stories like this should be told, subscribe for more. Your voice matters, and together we can make sure it's heard.